Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Government House. My name is Hugh Borroman. I have the honour to be the official secretary to Her Excellency the Governor, and I'll be the Master of Ceremonies today. If you can, I would now ask you please to be upstanding for the arrival of Her Excellency the Governor and to remain standing for the playing of the Vice-Regal Salute.
I acknowledge that we're meeting this morning on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and I pay my respects to the elders. And I note, for those of you who came through the front gate, you will have noticed that we now have 4 flagpoles out the front, and we are proudly flying the Australian flag, the state flag of South Australia, the Australian Aboriginal flag and the Torres Strait Islander flag for the first time ever at Government House. Welcome everyone, it's wonderful to see you this morning. This is a very happy day indeed, but I really want to make sure that you all enjoy it, that you feel comfortable, that no one feels overcome by nerves or the height of the ceiling or anything else. I really, for those of recipients of awards at the back, I really want you to feel as comfortable today as I know you have every day of the service that you've given and that we're recognising today. And for those of you here at the front, typically the ones those at the back love most or who have relied most heavily on, you know, of course, very intimately the service of the person closest to you that we're recognising today. But in the course of the ceremony, you'll come to hear about other service, other exceptional achievement. That all adds up to be something quite significant, really. The Order of Australia, our national honours system, is designed to recognise outstanding service and exceptional achievement. And the extraordinary part of it really is the sum total of all of those awards, but also the fact that recipients are not looking for recognition. Typically they're surprised by it, they feel humbled by it, sometimes they feel slightly embarrassed by it, and occasionally, and this has happened a couple of times in investiture ceremonies, people have taken me aside afterwards and said when the email arrived, the email from the Honours Secretariat, they thought it couldn't possibly be true. They consulted their spouses, they agreed it couldn't possibly be true, and they deleted the email. And I think that not everyone did, thankfully, at the back because you're here, but I think it speaks to what drives the sense of service and achievement. And we recognise that today in the presence of our political leaders and also in the presence of our service leaders. So I want to acknowledge that too. And the final point I'd like to make is recipients of awards are here because someone, often unknown to them, another Australian, recognised something special in their service and took the trouble to nominate them. And my request of all of you is, now that you know, and you certainly will by the end of today's ceremony, what exceptional service and achievement looks like, please be on the lookout for other Australians, other South Australians who might not yet have been recognised. That will give them the opportunity to enjoy the special occasion that we are going to enjoy together today. Over to you, Official Secretary.
Your Excellency, the following appointments to Member of the Order of Australia in the General Division have been made. Professor Helen Siobhan Marshall is recognised for significant service to medicine in the field of vaccinology and public health, to research and to education. For much of her medical career, Professor Marshall's research focus has been on vaccinology, public health and infectious diseases. Graduating from the University of Adelaide in 1988, she worked for a time in Western Samoa, returning to do paediatric training at the Women's and Children's Hospital. She is now a senior medical practitioner in the Women's and Children's Health Network Division of Paediatric Medicine and the medical director of its Vaccinology and Immunology Research Trials Unit. She shares her knowledge with current students as the University of Adelaide's Deputy Director, Clinical and Translational Research, Robinson Research Institute, and as a Professor of Vaccinology in the School of Medicine. Over the past few years, Professor Marshall has been a member of the COVID-19 expert database of the Australian Academy of Science and an invited expert to the South Australian Health COVID-19 Vaccination Implementation Group. She also sits on the World Health Organisation's COVID-19 Maternal Immunisation Working Group, and she was named 2022 South Australian of the Year. Professor Helen Siobhan Marshall. Professor John Matthew Williams is recognised for significant service to tertiary education, to the law and to professional organisations. Professor Williams is considered one of Australia's leading constitutional law scholars and is a past council member and vice president of the Australian Association of Constitutional Law. He is currently interim provost of the University of Adelaide, as well as its executive dean in the Faculty of Professions. He holds the Dame Roma Mitchell Chair of Law. He is also the founding director and chair of the South Australian Law Reform Institute, established in 2010. Professor Williams' standing in the international legal community has been evident through visiting positions at the Universities of Victoria, British Columbia, and Cape Town. He has been a Menzies Foundation Fellow at King's College London and a Harold White Fellow of the National Library of Australia. He sits on the board of the Adelaide Festival Ideas and has been a member of the Fulbright South Australian Selection Committee and the South Australian Rhodes Scholarship Selection Committee. In 2003, he received a Centenary Medal for service to the Centenary of Federation celebrations. Professor John Matthew Williams. Your Excellency, the Medal of the Order of Australia in the General Division has been awarded to the following recipients. Mr. Ian Barry Digby is recognised for service to the community and to the motor industry. Mr. Digby's career in the motor industry dates back to 1969, when he started work at Ford Australia. He stayed with Ford for nearly 20 years, climbing the ranks to become an executive. In 1985, he joined Mazda as state manager, and while there, he was involved in the Mazda Sports Club Awards. His passion for motor vehicles and the motor industry extends to founding several automotive shows, and he is currently secretary of the Automotive Exhibitors Association of South Australia. Mr. Digby was a member of the Rotary Club of Burnside from 1982 to 1988, joining the board in 1985. In 2014, he also joined the Lions Club of Glenside and immediately became Vice President and Chair of the Activities Committee. Mr. Ian Barry Digby. Mr. Peter Dunn is recognised for service to the road transport industry. For more than 40 years, Mr. Dunn operated Dunn's bus service in Kadina with his wife Shirley. At that time, Mr. Dunn was also an active board member of the Bus and Coach Association of South Australia, holding various executive positions between 1976 and 2012. He was also the school bus subcommittee chairman for much of that time. Mr. Dunn went on to serve 2 terms as the association's president from 1989 to 1994, and again from 2002 to 2004, and he is now a life member of the association. His commitment to the industry extends to volunteer work at the National Military Vehicle Museum since 2015. He is also former chairman of the Independent Bus and Coach Operators and served on the Bus Industry Advisory Panel. In 2018, Mr. Dunn was inducted into the National Road Transport Hall of Fame. Mr. Peter Dunn. Mrs. Valda Elaine Finn is recognised for service to the community of Goolwa. For nearly 20 years, Mrs. Finn collected goods for the monthly charity auction at the Lions Club of Goolwa. She would clean up the donated goods, sort them, box them, and store them in her family garage ready for auction. The auction would often raise between $30,000 and $40,000 for the club. Mrs. Finn also helped with gardening at the club rooms. Although not a Lions member herself, she was an integral part of the Goolwa Club in which her husband Bob was a member. In 2006, the club gave her a thank you plaque, and in 2016 awarded her the Melvin Jones Award. In 2018, she received a Community Service of the Year award from Alexandrina Council. Born in Paraki in the Southern Mallee, Mrs. Finn has been a community-minded volunteer her entire life. Before moving to Goolwa, she helped raise money to build the Paraki Hall and was on the Geranium Area School Auxiliary. Mrs. Valda Elaine Finn. Mr. Gary Bruce Fleetwood is recognised for service to law enforcement agencies. Mr. Fleetwood draws on 12 years in the police force and 8 as a lobbyist with the Sporting Shooters Association of Australia in his role as an expert firearms specialist with the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission. He was seconded to the Commission in 2004 to help identify and trace illicit firearms. As part of that role, he established a national firearm trace program to help law enforcement agencies identify the source of illicit firearms in Australia. Since 2005, Mr. Fleetwood has been the Australian delegate to numerous United Nations meetings relating to technical issues on firearm identification and tracing. He has also presented to law enforcement agencies in Europe, Asia, and the United States. In 2010, he created firearm identification data for the National Firearm Identification Database, which he now administers. Mr Fleetwood also provided expert advice in relation to firearms, including at the inquest into the Lint Cafe siege in Sydney. Mr Gary Bruce Fleetwood. Ms Pauline Claire Frost is recognised for service to the community of Playford. Ms Frost's volunteer work over nearly 4 decades has seen her named Citizen of the Year 3 times for the City of Monopara, the City of Elizabeth and, most recently, the City of Playford. She is also a past recipient of the Premier's Certificate of Recognition for Outstanding Volunteer Service and the Pride of Australia Medal, Environmental category, South Australia. In 1985, Ms Frost helped to set up Playford Greening and Land Care Incorporated, formerly Greening of Monopara, and is its current chair. She is also a foundation member of Trees for Life. Ms Frost is a life member of Greening Australia, South Australia, and of the Murray-Darling Association. While her focus has been on environmental causes, Ms Frost has also spent 9 years on the committee of the Monopara Christmas Pageant and was on the committee for the Elizabeth's 150 Jubilee Monopara Bicentennial. Ms Pauline Claire Frost. Mr Kenneth John Gillman is recognised for service to veterans and to their families. At just 20 years old, Mr Gillman was called up to serve in the Vietnam War. He spent 2 years as a private in the 3rd Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment. He draws on this experience to support other veterans and their families through a variety of volunteer roles. He is an active member and past president of the South Australian branch of the Vietnam Veterans Federation. He also sat on the South Australian Government Veterans Advisory Council and the Department of Veteran Affairs Deputy Commissioners Consultative Forum in South Australia. From 2003 to 2019, Mr Gillman wrote, produced and presented Vets on Air, a weekly radio program for Coast FM. On top of his work with veterans and their families, Mr Gillman volunteered with Semaphore and North Haven Surf Life Saving and with community netball and football. Mr Kenneth John Gillman. Mrs. Robyn Marie Glenn is recognised for service to the community and to children. For 30 years, Mrs. Glenn has been a familiar face at the Tea Tree Gully Toy Library every Thursday. She supports the 500 families that use the service, signing them up, checking the toys in and out, and making sure everything is clean and tidy. The library holds about 2,500 toys, and Mrs. Glenn is kept busy sorting them into categories and managing the hiring process. She also helps catalogue new toys, numbering and engraving them. The Toy Library relies on volunteers, with Mrs. Glenn joining the team after seeing a newspaper advertisement. Mrs. Glenn is also recognised for her volunteer service with the Rotary Club of Port Adelaide Art Show from 1988 to 1999. Mrs. Robyn Marie Glenn. Mr. Philip Hooper Goode is recognised for service to the community in a range of roles. Mr. Goode has been serving the community of Victor Harbour for close to 40 years. He joined the Rotary Club of Encounter Bay in 1984, staying for 15 years. In 1998, he became a board member of the Victor Harbour Private Hospital and has been chairman since 2014, with 2 separate stints as deputy chair. Mr. Goode is also the current chairman of the Newland Hill Water Scheme. Between 1987 and 1998, he was a council member of the Victor Harbour Primary School and is a past delegate of the Fleurieu Regional Representative Council. In 2012, after a number of drownings at Petrel Cove, Mr. Goode advocated and consulted through the City of Victor Harbour to update warning signs at the Encounter Bay beach. Mr. Goode also spent time as a wool and meat executive with the former South Australian Farmers Federation. Mr. Philip Hooper Goode. Your Excellency, that concludes the presentations for this morning.